This episode is brought to you by Cube Gallery. For more than 5 years, the gallery has mounted shows of engaging artworks and has also represented the Visayas region in various international fairs. Aside from its physical space in Crossroads, Banilad, Cebu City, you can check out Cube Gallery's online collection on artsy.net/cube-gallery, link in the show notes. This month at Cube Gallery, Myriad by Lian Reboja. Lian Reboja explores the complexities of the human psyche with his fourth solo exhibition, Myriad, opening on September 26 at 6 p.m. at Cube Gallery. While he paints a fictitious world inhabited by beasts and bizarre characters, they are autobiographic and metaphorical accounts of his introspections. I talked to Lian. I am excited to release his episode, most likely next week, definitely next week. Watch out. His episode coming out soon. This podcast is also sponsored by Handurao Pizza. Even as early as last year, I talked to a lot of musicians, and it inevitably comes to a point where we talk about Handurao Pizza, and they've always been a great venue for local music. I have many memories playing music in Handurao Pizza, notably one very embarrassing solo acoustic performance that I talked about in the Michael Anthony Coran episode. Yeah, Handurao Pizza is one of those iconic places for local music, and it continues to be one of those iconic places for local music. So, if you're looking for a place to chill, a spot that supports local artists and musicians, a place to enjoy delicious homegrown pizza and ice-cold below zero beer, look no further. Visit Handurao Pizza. They have many branches which you can find listed on their website, handuraopizza.com, or you can have their wonderful pizza delivered to you. Yes, delivered at your doorstep via Grab Food or Food Panda. Thank you, Handurao Pizza, for sponsoring the episode. Let's get to the show. Welcome to 032 Conversations, the podcast where we talk to creatives, see how they live, and how they do their work. I'm your host, Carlo Villarete. The week started weird here in Cebu. So news came out recently. You might have seen it online. You might have seen the uproar in Facebook that bikes, for a while, bikes were banned from the bridges between Mactan and Cebu Island. And the reasoning for the bike ban, there was a disconnect with the reasoning, at least the initial reasoning, because they were saying that because recently there's been a couple of suicides and suicide attempts in the bridges connecting the two islands. And while suicide is a real issue, depression is a real issue. So if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling unusually sad, and these thoughts are starting to pop to mind, really talk to somebody about it. And it just talk to somebody. I think there's a suicide hotline. Let me check that. Yeah, so apparently the Department of Health has, as of May 2, they launched a national crisis hotline to assist people with mental health concerns. So you can just contact 0917-899-8727 or 0917-989-8727 also. So, yeah, you can contact the hotline. So if you're experiencing some mental health concerns, feel free to contact them, and I hope it helps you. But anyway, there was a bike ban on the bridge, and the reasoning for the bike ban was because of these suicide attempts that have been happening lately. And frankly, there was a disconnect, and there was an online outcry over it. There were there were people. Number one, people clearly saw the disconnect between banning bikes and suicide attempts. There were people who they were concerned about the bike commuters, the people who bike to work. The majority of the people who bike to work do so because number one, it's a lot cheaper, even cheaper than a jeepney. It's also faster. There's a whole bunch of other reasons, and this news came out of nowhere, and it seemed to affect these people right away, and which compelled a lot of bike enthusiasts, myself included, to voice out our concerns online. And even over the weekend, there was a ride that was organized, a ride for a cause as a form of protest for the bike ban on the bridge. And, I joined it. It was actually quite fun. We went to the old bridge from Cebu to Mactan, and then we biked to the new bridge, then Mactan to Cebu, and then we went to the Mandaue City Hall as a form of protest. And, it was covered. And then it was covered by media, and there's a lot of people there, probably 100 plus bikers. And in the end, they've allowed bicycles to pass through the bridges, but cyclists will need to walk their bikes through the bridge instead of bike it through. And it seems like for the most part, people are okay with this. But personally, I don't think the conversation should end here. I'm not sure, but I don't think there is a law in the Philippines that encourages cycling or encourages cycling infrastructures to be built in our cities. And I feel like this needs to change. So I'm pushing this interview forward because we talk a lot about the congestion problems, about biking as a commute. But before we get to that, this episode is sponsored by Kent Combs. Full disclosure, Kent Combs is owned by a really good friend of mine, Jason Almendras, and he's one of the guys who co-founded 032 with me. And if there's one guy I trust who with good taste, it's Jason. Before he got married, I believe his description on social media was something like, I like nice things. Yeah, like that was his description on social media. Jason Almendras, I like nice things, which was code for really cool, fashionable, high quality stuff. So if he decides to do something, it's really good, and he's decided to bring in Kent Combs. So guys, it's time to stop using your girl's hairbrush and get yourself a decent comb, and not those mass-produced things you get in the groceries. I'm talking about Kent Combs. Kent Combs are handmade combs from Britain's oldest hairbrush manufacturer. Do your hair a favor, buy a Kent comb. The handmade Kent comb is made from large sheets of cellulose acetate rather than being molded. This material is tactile, flexible, and strong. The Kent combs have rounded teeth which ensure a smooth and comfortable action that glides effortlessly through the hair without scratching or damaging your scalp. You can follow them on Instagram, Kent Philippines. That's KENT Philippines. And if you use the promo code KENT, Kent, you get 10% from the assembly online when you order a Kent comb from assembly.032.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. Thank you, Kent Combs, for sponsoring the episode. So in this week's episode is Nigel Paul Villarete, or people know him as Paul Villarete. And then let me take a look at his LinkedIn profile. So Paul used to be the city administrator a few months ago. Well, he was the city administrator from December 2016 to June 2019. And then with the change of, with the new election and everything. So he's not the city administrator anymore. And then he also used to be the project manager at the SRP. So when they made the SRP, he was the project manager. And he was the CEO and general manager of the Mactan Cebu International Airport Authority from October 2010 to December 2016. So this is a rare opportunity for me to talk to somebody who's worked in government. I wanted to talk to him because I remember a year or two ago, I shared an article about cycling and then, my experience cycling in Cebu. And I think he was one of the people who commented in the comments, on the Facebook comments. And for whatever reason, I felt compelled to click on his profile and just look at what he did on Facebook. And at the time, he was the city administrator. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And, and since I was starting cycling in Cebu, I knew that the city has a long way to making, to working out our congestion problem in Cebu. And then I was looking at his posts, and his posts seemed very pro cycling. And, as the human nature, which is to gravitate to people who you agree with. So I followed him on Facebook, and over the past year or so, he's been posting all sorts of urban planning things and different ways of looking at urban planning. So when his stint in government ended, I thought it might be a good opportunity to talk to him about all of these things, about traffic, about different modes of transportation, about how we should look at this congestion problem here in Cebu. But this episode, I was supposed to release this episode maybe 2 or 3 weeks from now, but I felt compelled to move this interview forward because of this whole bike ban issue on the bridges, and how the city just lacks infrastructure for bikes. There are some buildings in the city, like new buildings in the city or malls in the city, that don't have bike racks. There's no place for you to park your bike. It turns out there's not really even a law that forces Philippine cities or Philippine buildings to have bike infrastructure. So I think I felt compelled to move this interview forward. Obviously, this was recorded way before the bike ban issue on the bridges came about. So I think it's relevant now because people are talking about it and looking at different ways to view transportation. So before we get to that interview, I'm going to be releasing an Ask Me Anything episode anytime soon. So if you want to send me a question, you can tweet us at 032cebu, or you can tweet me at Sober Musings, or you can send us an email at info@032.com, and then you can just make the subject line question. And if it's a good one, I'll answer it in an Ask Me Anything episode in the future. Also, we release a new episode every Tuesday, so if this is your first time to listen to 032 Conversations, we have a new podcast every Tuesday talking to an interesting person and learning something new. So, let's get to that interview with Paul Villarete. But I think, so as I mentioned, I think I was aware of you when I wrote this article about cycling, because I started cycling as a commute 2 years ago.
We started basically the same about 2 years ago.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
As a commute. But I cycled before.
Sorry, you cycled before? Yeah, when I was a kid. And then, in fact, that's one of the things that was surprising to me that, okay, so I was cycling when I was a kid, but I went through 10 years of sitting in my car, just waiting because I was stuck in traffic, because before the thought even occurred in my brain, I could cycle as a commute. And then when it finally did, it was just so much faster for me.
I think that what happened is that I've been already advocating for bicycles or cycling for a long time, 5 years or even 10 years. In terms of cycling, technically, in terms of what I understand, because I'm an urban policy analyst by profession, and advocating for transportation. But it's a clinical thing. It's an academic thing that this is good, this is bad. I was not really doing it. It's really 2 years before that I intentionally bought a bike and said I will cycle to work every day.
So before you were just advocating it, but you weren't doing it yourself.
Yeah, it's something like, it's something that you teach in school. It's a concept that is, I believe that is correct. But I did not cycle going to work until 2 years ago.
Until 2 years ago.
The only time that I was really cycling every day was in 1984 to 1986, when I was taking up a master's in Bangkok.
Oh.
Because we were in the campus and we just cycle around in the campus. Everywhere we go, we cycle.
Yeah, well, That's why, because I want to talk about you know, alternatives that people can do right now. So yeah, I see all the time, people post on Facebook, oh, they're complaining, the traffic here, the traffic there, and then there's actually other ways around it. Because the thing is that if we wait for other people to solve the problem, it will really take long, as I'm sure you're familiar with. But just a little bit of background for the listener ba. So Kato, I became aware of you when I wrote that article on cycling. And then for whatever reason I clicked on your profile and I saw I believe you were the city administrator for a while here in Cebu. Can you talk about your background a little bit na lang, just so that the listener knows? So you mentioned you were an urban planner by profession, that whole thing. Because I feel like it's a huge opportunity because how many people here in Cebu can you talk to who is an urban planner, diba? So I'm just curious, can you talk about your background a little bit?
If it's okay, I cannot actually talk about it in a very short, in a very short manner because I guess I'm too old that I have done a lot of things. But very, very briefly, and we'll say it fast. I'm a civil engineer. I finished it in 1983, and I took up my master's for structural engineering in Bangkok, in Thailand. And I came back, became the chairman or the department of civil engineering in University of the Visayas. And then I started really my planning career when in 1989 I worked with NEDA.
NEDA. Yeah. What's NEDA again? NEDA?
That's National Economic and Development Authority. Okay. So it talks about development, in our case at the time, development of Region 7, Bohol, Cebu, Negros Oriental, and
this was
1989 to 1994.
Okay.
After that, I was working with a consulting firm, Schema Consult, Manila-based, basically doing, of course, engineering work, planning work, studies, feasibility studies, and all of those things. Then in 2001, I became, Mayor Osmeña appointed me as city administrator for 2 years. I did not really like the job.
Oh yeah, why?
I still don't like it that much.
Why? What is the role of the city administrator exactly?
A lot of people will tell you that the city administrator is what we call the little mayor in City Hall. Actually, that's not true. That might be true for certain cities. That might be true for some cities. But basically, city administrator is not the administrator of Cebu City. It's the administrator of City Hall.
Okay.
That's the thing that we need to distinguish, because sometimes people just relate the city and City Hall as one. There are two different things. City Hall is the government. It's the government that try to plan for the city. The city itself is not City Hall. The city is us. The city is people. And sometimes people don't try to understand that differentiation. A city is just a group of people living in this particular place. City Hall is the government per se. So I'm the administrator of City Hall. I'm not the head of all the departments, but I'm the only one who can call meetings. So we're co-equals with the other departments, but I try to harmonize that all the departments work with everything that the mayor wants. So that's city administrator.
Okay, so you got the job 2001?
Yeah.
For 2 years, you didn't like it?
Yeah, and I said, I called the mayor. He was in the US, and I said, can I, because he gave me 2 jobs at the time. I'm the project manager of the South Reclamation Project, SRP. That was finished. And I was city administrator. I said, I cannot do this. Project management is a tiresome job. I have to go to the project and, arrange that everything will be in place so that we can complete in 2004. I cannot do this.
You cannot do both at the same time.
I cannot do both at the same time. So I said, can I just be project manager? So, okay, you find another city administrator. So I looked for another city administrator, and luckily I found his old city administrator 10 years back, 1995. So I said, okay, I'm going to be the city administrator, but you should be the city planning officer. So I have no choice. I have to accept that. I did not like the city administrator's job, but city planning is something which I like. Something which is very close also to the management of SRP. I can do both. I cannot do the city administrator thing and the SRP thing, but city planning and SRP are correlated, so I can do that. So I was city planning till 2010.
So city planning meaning, does that mean like planning where the roads are, that sort of thing, or
on the macro level,
yes.
meaning on the the roads are basically planned. Maybe the major thoroughfares, we plan that, but the detailed planning is done by the city engineering office.
Of course, yeah.
So city planning is basically more on socio-economic. What's the vision of the city? How do we do this? And of course, from here we go down to the details, we go down to the specifics, and we involve now the different departments.
Okay, so you're city planning from 2001 to...
No,
2003 na. Till...
2 years city administrator, then 7 years of city planning.
Okay.
2010.
2010. And then after, was that also like the change of regime at
Yeah.
2010? So then you were out of government, and then you were...
I was still in government.
Still in government?
I was appointed as general manager of Mactan Airport.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I saw that. And then then you got back into the city administrator job like a few years ago, diba?
2016, yeah.
2016. No? Okay, because... So what were your like struggles there? Because presumably, I mean, I've seen your Facebook, so you advocate pedestrian lanes, biking lanes, that sort of thing. And then, admittedly, it's gotten better. No, there are, at least in terms of pedestrian lanes, more pedestrian lanes than there were maybe 10 years ago. No, because before, wow, there really were none. There was literally buildings right next to the road, diba? And then, admittedly, there still are portions in Cebu that are like that to some degree, no? So what were the challenges in doing? Because like I mentioned, I follow you on Facebook, and then I see your posts, and then I will admit that I agree to your posts. For the most part, at least in terms of like urban planning.
Concept.
Yeah, in terms of concept, no? So what were the struggles in, like I'm not familiar at all with government, with how the processes are, etc. But what are the struggles in terms of, implementing those ideas?
Maybe it's something that has to do with practicality, something that has to do with what is the reality of things. First and foremost, you talk about concepts, you talk about all of these things. We tend to talk about generalized things that are more or less accepted all over the world as a body of knowledge, as a concept. But then again, when you put that against the background of where we are, we have to understand that there are more or less about a little less than 200 countries and thousands of cities. And we know that the reality is not always there. And in fact, I think 90% fall short of the reality. You can only see a few cities or a few countries in the world that what we think as good literally can be seen in their cities and countries. So that's why I always use the word looking forward, aspirational. So things that we talk about are always aspirational. I think that we believe in these things, but we know that the reality at present is not there. But we believe that these things can be attained if we continue bombarding the messages. Not only to, of course, to the people that listen to us, but also to the decision makers. Because again, we have to dichotomize the people into the masses and the people who govern. There are people who make decisions. And these people that matters, because there are things that are still in our present system, that what is ideal is not there. You see, I believe in democracy. I don't believe in dictatorship. Believe in democracy. But in a democracy, sometimes you read in Facebook a lot of things like, why are these people being elected? They are morons, they are idiots. It's usually the case, especially among the upper class. We are electing idiots and morons and stupid people in government. I said, so why are you electing them? I said, because the people elected them. So you said the people are morons and idiots also because they elected morons and idiots. But then my concept is, if I believe in democracy, then you let it be.
That's the system we are in.
That's the system we're in. So the people love that kind of life, and that's also the message I think that we should tell the people. You complain about traffic, for example, but you only complain. When we go deeper to what causes traffic, it seems that you are the cause of traffic. So if you
explain that concept a little bit? Because I feel like, I've tried explaining this to people, and then it isn't very clear sometimes. No, they don't.
So you want to go to specifics, huh?
Yeah. Because, for example, of course, the people who are complaining about traffic, they're the ones causing the traffic generally. People in cars, that sort of thing, diba? Like, is that what you're trying to say, diba? So the people, when they say, the traffic on this road here, AS Fortuna, I've been here for an hour, they don't realize that he himself, and a person exactly like him, times 100, are the ones that are causing the traffic. The whole fact that a lot of people are in a car, that they're by themselves, they're in a car by themselves, so the car can fit 4 people, 5 people, but it's taking up space for that many people, but there's only one person there, as opposed to the other options, which are whatever it is, train, bus, in my case, like I'll bike, I take up a lot less space, diba?
Let me start first with who is who? Who is who? Who is asking the question? Who is complaining? Who is being complained about? Because this is where we miss the realities. For example, who's complaining about traffic? Everybody.
Well, I'll be honest. I hardly ever complain about traffic because.
and when I complain about traffic that it's bad, and traffic is bad. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying traffic is bad.
Yeah.
When you complain, it's really you're getting angry.
Yeah.
So who are those people who are angry that traffic is bad? We have to identify people, because it is people whom we serve. If you think about trying to solve things, I always ask the question, for whom? I always ask those questions at the end, for whom? For whom are we talking about? For whom are we planning? For whom are we looking for solutions for? Because if I'm only looking for solutions for myself, then I will only solve my own problems. But we are in a situation, we live in a city that you cannot live by yourself. So you have to abide with what happens in the city. So even if you have the best answer in the whole world for a solution, if the other 99% or 999.99% do not agree with you, then there's no solution. So for example, traffic. Who complains about traffic? I think we agree most people, if not all, complains about traffic. But there are different kinds of complaint. Me, I just say, before it's 30 minutes, now it's 1 hour. But sometimes I say, okay, it's 1 hour. That's it. I just have to, taas mo ako ni digress gamay nga. Traffic is relative. Traffic is always relative. It's always against the past.
Yeah.
Because when you complain about traffic and you go to Manila, usually traffic is better in Cebu.
Yeah.
If you live in Tagbilaran, you complain about traffic in Tagbilaran. Everybody, by the way, everybody complains about traffic. Even in a small city in Mindanao or Northern Luzon, they complain about traffic. But when you go to the bigger city, you say, this is worse. And ours is not traffic. So it's always relative. So even here, you say traffic is not bad. You go to another city in Indonesia or in Bangkok, it's really worse.
Yeah.
More hours on the street. So, number one, traffic is relative because it's just time. Traffic basically is what used to be 20 minutes becomes 40 minutes. What used to be 30 minutes becomes 1 hour. What used to be 1 hour becomes 2 hours. That's traffic.
Yeah.
And it's always increasing. Panagsara ng mahitabo ng traffic nga decrease. No? So who complains about it? If we are going to look, if you ask, that's why we really need surveys. And surveys are the best kind of thermometer to determine what really is the problem. Because sometimes what we think is the problem is only a problem of a small minority. It's not the problem of everybody.
Yeah, it could be a problem of a vocal minority or said.
A vocal minority.
Yeah, because that's the other thing with the... At least me, as I was voicing out, like the people who complain about traffic, the ones in cars, for example. But actually, the ones who are... There's a lot more people who are lining up for jeepneys, just there in the... Kanang like during rush hour, and then they're just lining up there, and then they're just there for hours and hours. Sometimes maybe waiting an hour just to go inside the jeepney for another 1 hour trip, diba? And I actually feel like those people are the ones who are underserved in a way, at least from my perspective. I don't really know.
They are, but the thing is, they're the ones who are not complaining so much.
Oh, they're the ones who don't complain. Maybe they should.
Di man po. We also look at like, okay, this is going to the to this conversation. We always belong to a certain part of society.
Yeah.
So you're making a blog, right?
Yeah.
Who are your listeners? Who are your audience?
I don't know. I would say people like me.
People like you.
Yeah.
Basically, we can actually, most probably they have cell phones.
Yeah.
Most probably they have cars.
Most likely they have a computer.
Yeah.
They have cell phones. I wouldn't say they all have cars, because there's a lot of people now who are kind of like me in a sense. People who work here. Like we're in shout out to E-Office. This is a co-working space, and then a lot of people, the reason why they like to go to a co-working space is so that they don't need to go so far anymore to work.
I'll introduce a new concept also. It includes people who may not have cars, but who understands what it is to have a car.
Yes.
Who has a mindset of a car owner or a car rider.
Okay.
This is mindset. This is not you really have a car.
Okay.
Because we grew up. There's a book called The 7 Habits. I think you have
The 7 Habits for Successful People.
Yeah.
Okay.
By Stephen Covey. There's a statement there that said, the world is not what it is, but because of who we are.
Okay.
The anecdote behind that is that there was a drought, and it was snowing, and then the cows were dying because they cannot find grass. So the farmer put green glasses on the cows, and they ate the ice. They ate the snow because it's green. Okay. So I mean, what we see is not what the world is, but because of who we are. In other words, if I'm a very poor person who has begging arms in the streets of intersections of Cebu, and I see all this traffic, I do not see it the same way as a millionaire is passing through there and sees the traffic. Different concepts. Our mindset are different. That guy looks at it and maybe he did not even care whether there's traffic or not. Whether he's just asking for alms. He's happy because the cars are
there.
So he's happy and he says, plenty of cars, plenty to ask for. But the car owner is pissed off because of the traffic. So there's a difference in perception. For one person, there's a big problem. The other person, there's no problem at all. That's why I don't have the data, but my feeling and my belief is that the traffic situation in Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, or elsewhere is not as bad for a jeepney rider than for a car driver.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that's hard to believe because, well, of course, I don't know.
I mean, the level of frustration.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I would understand that because it is very, for whatever reason, if you're in the car and then you're driving it, it is very frustrating. I guess because you feel like you can go faster, but then the person in the jeepney, they sit there and then they can do other things.
Yeah. And
that I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's true, huh?
Maybe you can try. Go to a jeepney and ask. Everybody will say there's a big problem with traffic.
Yeah.
But if there's a way,
no, but like in terms of like measuring the
frustration, the level of, if you can find a way to measure that, it will. I think I'm right that the level of frustration is really worse for those car owners and car drivers who are good doing that every day than for a jeepney rider.
Huh. So is it like, we get what we deserve, with the way our city is in terms of the traffic?
No, because there is, and I'm going into now the concept of cars, the negativity of cars. There is a sense of entitlement for
car owners.
For cars. For those who are differentiate the car owner or a car driver and a car rider. Because in reality, there is a deep imbalance in terms of government resources for the rich and the poor. Because the car owner believes that he or she is entitled to that amount of space, which the ordinary person who does not own cars should not have. Well, people don't think like that.
Yeah. But like, that's the... No, that's why if you're a car owner and you're stuck in traffic, you're so angry because you think... which reminds me of like people who complain about motorcycles, for example. Gani, they're the ones causing the traffic, and then my thinking is actually they're not.
This morning there's also a case of in Facebook we always look at Cebu Road Heroes.
Oh, okay. And then
there's an argument about cars who are speeding up, approaching a pedestrian lane because they don't want people to cross. And to a certain extent, I really find a lot of people angry while we have pedestrian crossings in B. Rodriguez, for example. It's the way I heard of one, Grab drivers. Why they place the pedestrian lanes so close to each other? Because it's so that people can cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so close to each other so that more people can cross. Because at the end of the day, it boils down to who are you giving the space to? To the car drivers or to the pedestrians who want to cross the space? And in fact, if we are going to reevaluate, what are those pedestrian crossings in Osmeña Boulevard for? For whom are those infrastructure? For the pedestrians?
Are you saying like they're for the cars?
It's for the cars so that they can move faster.
Yeah, that's right. Because that you're basically limiting where pedestrians can cross because of the pedestrian lane, essentially. If there's no pedestrian lane or there's no rules towards pedestrians, then they would cross wherever. Diba?
Yeah, they will cross. No, they will not cross at all.
Oh, they won't cross at all, yeah.
So that you can speed.
Yeah.
Now, imagine you are in a... Where they grew up? Where did you grow up? In Cebu. You did not grow up in the province or?
Here, Cebu City.
Where?
Banilan.
Where in Banilan?
I lived in Paradise Village when I was a kid. So I used to I went to school in Sacred Heart, and then we used to carpool. And then I got tired of waiting for a carpool, so I would just take a jeepney from Sacred Heart to Manila.
But you live inside the village.
Inside the village. So
there are roads inside the village.
There's roads inside the village?
There are roads.
Of course, yeah. So it would drop me in the corner and I would walk home.
But when you're young, you can play in the roads.
Yeah, all the time.
If you go to Manila Road, is quite a heavy road. But let's go to a small town, maybe in at the northern and southern tip of Cebu.
Okay.
You have a small town. You have a two-lane road. In the 1960s, 1970s, maybe, or 1980s, how many buses will pass by there? Quite a few. So people can actually live on opposite sides of the road. They cross. They're neighbors. And then, because of development, you need to widen it to 4 lanes. Then you widen it to 6 lanes, like Natalia Bacal. It's difficult to cross.
Yeah.
If you widen it to 10 lanes, like in EDSA, it's impossible to cross. There's no such thing, no? So, before, you cross only 20 meters to your neighbor. But when it became 4 lanes or 6 lanes, like in Spania Boulevard, they make you walk 200 kilometers towards the skyway or the pedestrian crossing. Then you cross the street.
Oh, you have to go up the stairs, pa.
You have to go up the stairs. Then you walk another 200. So that's 420 meters. That's against 20. So why are you penalizing the original people there? If I'm the original persons living there on both sides, this is the road, and I can go to you in 3 minutes and talk. Why do I have to walk 200 meters and go up and just to talk to you? Why? Because we are giving this area for the cars.
For the cars
for the vehicles to pass the road. That's giving you an insight of, sometimes we take these things for granted because we believe this is the product of development. This is the product of, because we are now almost like a first world country. We are developed. We have all of these things. But basically, we are digressing in terms of social entitlement. Because we are favoring the vehicles instead of the pedestrian.
And then you've mentioned plenty of times, like on your Facebook, that like a lot of countries, instead of making more roads or wider roads, a lot of countries are even seeing the negative effects of having a car-centric transport system, and then in fact are actually closing roads, diba? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I remember, for example, for me, the reason why I thought it would be a good idea to just bike around as opposed to drive is, I think 2 or 3 years ago, our family, we visited Copenhagen, and then it's a bike culture there, and it really is, like it's really just bikes everywhere. And then, so I looked around and I thought, well, we can, of course the weather there is, well, it's like kakaingon nga, it's nicer. There's a time where it's nice and it's not too cold, not too hot, but also at times there's times that nga bugnaw sa gyud kaayo, and then the sunlight is only 2 or 3 hours a day. But when we were there, it was really nice weather, and it was super nice to have that environment. And then that's when the seed got planted into my head. I could just bike in Cebu. We'll give it a try at the very least. And then I remember digging further, and then it turns out Amsterdam in like the 1950s or Copenhagen or Amsterdam. I'm mixing up.
I think Copenhagen.
Copenhagen in the 1950s, 1960s. It was car-centric, correct, diba? And then there was an increase in the deaths of kids. I think they were getting run over by the cars. So then the city did something to make it less car-centric. I don't know. They put a refocus back on bikes, and then now it's one of the best places to live in the world, diba? So I don't know. Can you talk about like some cities who are, initially, because right now the Philippines in general is moving towards being car-centric. We keep, people
No,
keep
it's not.
clamoring
It's
towards
not
wider
moving.
roads
It's
or
not moving towards. We are already.
Oh, we're here, okay. Yeah. But like like it seems like people think that the solution is, oh yeah, we should make this place wider. We should have, and then as I mentioned, there's a lot of countries who are doing the opposite na noon. I think, I don't know, do you have some examples of that, of countries who are doing the opposite in terms of putting less focus on cars?
Barcelona, even Paris is
Like Barcelona, for example, what are they doing?
it's a different. It's something unique because they place the entire city into blocks, big blocks, and they plan its block. So it's not the same as ours that we have corridors.
Yeah, but theirs is really like small squares
Yeah,
put
small
together.
squares. So
here it's like big.
Here is you have Natalio Bacalso, then you go to Manila Road, then you go to Uano Avenue. It's really what we call it in transport planning. We call it corridors.
Corridors.
These are corridors.
Ah, okay. Yeah, these long roads. So if you wanted to go to, like one of my frustrations, for example, is I'll be in Panagdait, and then I know that Manila is right there in the next side, but there's no way for me to get there unless I go all the way back to I don't know now the names of the roads. All the way back to like that Mobolo Road or to AS Fortuna.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way to go to Manila. I mean, those are like, it's really far. That's like 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers, I think.
You're from Panagdait. You can actually go to Manila Road straight.
No, but you have to pass Mobolo. You have to pass...
No, you find out there's always a way. That's what I learned biking for more than...
Ah, yeah?
3
There's
years.
like a little road?
There are ways. The bikers know that. We tend to find ways because there's always... What does a bicycle need?
Ah, yeah. No, but I meant for like a car ba, for example.
Car, yes.
Yeah.
You have to
You really have to turn.
go around.
Yeah,
But the bike, that's one thing that people do not understand. And the majority of the complaints or the objections are, it's the traffic will kill you, the pollution and all of these things. I said, for the most part, I don't pass through wide roads. Why will you pass through wide roads? That's always the concept that you when you bike, you follow the traffic. You don't.
Oh yeah, I try to stay away from
You
the
stay
wide
away
roads.
from the traffic. Go to the side roads. There's a lot of there's a lot of roads that don't have much traffic, so you pass through there. And sometimes they are even on a straighter road than the ones that we pass through.
Yeah, no, though I know that for cycling, for me, it's turned out to be one of the, for me personally, like best decisions that I've ever made for myself. Because number one, I'm like so much more fit than I used to be.
Yeah.
And then also, I do not waste a lot of time. Like if I'm done with work, I can go home. I'm with my kids. Like, very early in the day. Like, let's say if I want to finish at 5, that's rush hour. By 5:30, I can be home already. And, a lot of people are still on the road at that time. So, cycling, for sure, you're not going to get any argument from me. No? Yeah. So so Barcelona, we were saying, so Barcelona's made in little blocks, and then they've started to just close certain areas from cars na lang yun, and just make it purely pedestrian centric.
Paris also is trying to do that now. Of course, coupled with this, there's a parallel movement which is connected basically to cycling as a mode of transport. It's basically from the green group, because the climate change has come into the attention of almost everybody. I think the last 1.5 decades that we started counting carbon savings and all of these things. And people understood, are starting to understand that, driving cars is very polluting in terms of greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
And so because of this, a lot of cities also are looking at the pollution that are caused by cars and fossil fueled vehicles. And that's why it's not only in terms of transportation per se, but in terms of environment that people now are looking at not, if not lowering the number of cars, actually decreasing it. It's only Singapore was, as of now, actually stopped cars.
Yeah, I think I saw, was there something like they're going to stop gas cars by 2022 but or something, or 2030, I forget na.
That's for the propulsion point of view, but the number of cars on the streets,
they're really lowering it.
They stopped it in 2018. You cannot buy a new car in Singapore now.
Oh, really?
Oh, you can, but if you understand that in Singapore you cannot buy a car if you don't have a certificate.
Yeah, I know that it's very hard to buy a car in Singapore. Diba?
It's not hard.
It's not hard. I mean, harder than here. Like, it's very easy to buy a car.
Let's qualify it. Hard in the sense that it's not hard in the sense that you can buy a car. It's hard in the sense that not anybody can buy a car. It's
Singapore.
controlled. In Singapore, starting I think 2007 or 2008, they said, and this is very important, connecting to what we discussed earlier. They said, this is Singapore. This is where we build. In the next 30 to 40 years, this is what we're going to build. We only have this space. We cannot allot a percentage of our space for road infrastructure. You have to understand, and people don't think about this, but we do. When you do urban planning, you always say, if I have a city like this, I will allot only 30% of my space for roads, or 20% as the case may be. You cannot have a city where your roads are 50% of the space.
Yeah.
Which is basically what will happen if you continue widening the roads. So they said, okay, this is only the space that allow for roads. And we compute that, we don't have enough space for roads. That's why they control the growth rate. So what they said in 2008 or 2007, every year we're going to control the number of cars that we're going to sell. I think it started with about 5%. Okay, so if we have
5% of what?
Of the number of cars. If you have 100 cars now, this will become 5% growth rate. So you'll only sell 5 cars if you have 100. So if you have 1,000, you sell 50. If you have 100,000, you sell 5,000 cars for next year.
So they did it like that?
They did it like that. So how do you do that? In order to do that, they have this COE system, Certificate of Entitlement. So they will say, okay, the beginning of the year, okay, January, for 2009, we are going to sell only 10,000 cars, divided into four-wheel, certain two-wheel, this class. There's a qualification. Only this and this, and then bid it out.
Bid it out.
Bid it out.
To
You
the
have to
public.
pay. Yeah, you have to pay for that piece of document
Oh,
to
interesting.
own a car.
So you're not even buying the car
You're
yet.
not buying the car.
So you...
You bid for that Certificate of Entitlement, COE. After
really?
after the interview, we'll go to your I'll open up this website where they go monthly bidding.
Really? Okay. So it's like a permit to own a car, basically.
It's a permit to own a car for 10 years.
For 10 years.
For
so
10
there's
years.
a limit pa.
No, because you're not allowed to use a car who's 10 years old. You have to dispose of it.
Okay.
For 10 years. I think, 10 years. So that goes on for 5%, no? The next year, they made it 4.5. That's why I knew beforehand. Before they announced, they announced it sometime in 2017. they announced sometime in November or October 2017 that 2018, no more new cars allowed to be sold. So meaning it will keep the number of cars constant. I knew that because I was looking at the program for 10 years. It's 5, 4.5, goes down.
Oh,
No.
really?
So when they do that, the next year the same thing. Now, what happened is that's why it's very expensive in Singapore, because the COA from the beginning cost more than the car.
Yeah, that's what I mean by it's very difficult to buy. It's just very expensive. But then apparently you're saying it's even more difficult because now you cannot buy a new car, period.
The kulatilla there is you can buy a new car. You can bid. You cannot buy. You can bid if there's a bidding, because there's still a bidding. You can bid for all the COAs that has expired. So in
that's now a constant
2019,
number. Okay.
na may na-expire. So, katong na-dispose na kay, you cannot own it anymore, will be replaced by the new cars. Those are the only cars that are...
So now the number of cars, at least the number of certificate of entitlements is a fixed number already.
Only
basically.
the replacement for the
No, but in
expired.
general, like all in all na ba? Yeah, so
It's fixed.
It's fixed. So let's say 100,000 cars, for
Yeah.
example. 100,000 certificate of entitlement.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. That's how they did it.
That's how they did it.
So
They're
it's
the
like a
only ones
10-year
who-
journey for them.
It's a 10-year journey for them. And then I think they are giving about 3 years to restudy it if they want to increase more. Yeah, they're not also closing their eyes to opening it a little bit.
Of course, the advantage of Singapore is they probably have one of the best public transportation systems. They have a really good public transportation system.
But then again, that disproves that argument, because the argument has always been the number one argument that has always been raised is that it's okay for us to not to use cars, but you improve the public transportation first. In other words, we will only stop using cars if the government will now put up the public transportation. But the thing is it will always be going towards a car-centric society if you're going to do it like that. Because in Singapore, they have one of the best public transportation, and yet they have to put people will buy cars. Even if there's public transportation, people will buy cars. People get richer and people will buy cars. But that's why government has to step in and cut it.
Yeah, wow, I can't. Well, is Singapore, because the other argument that I get for, at least for cycling, for example, is kanang, how can you do that here? It's so hot, it's so dusty, and then, and then of course, like you talking about Barcelona and Paris, but like the problem with Barcelona, they can close the streets because they have that block system. So if they have an area that they close the streets, there's still basically another road that can probably that a car can pass through to get to the destination. That hard to close the streets here. If you close one street here, you're closing an artery in the city. What city anywhere around the world, that has been able to tackle the transportation problem that is kind of similar to Cebu in terms of infrastructure, weather, I don't know, population? Is there a city like that? Is there a city that we can look to nga murag, here's a model, here's something very similar to where we live, and they were able to do it?
Okay. I think we have to regroup our line of thinking because we started off with actually trying to bust cars.
What do you mean?
Our discussion is actually cars are not good and public transportation.
Okay, yeah.
That's our direction. But what we are saying actually is not that cars are bad, because in Japan is one of the number 1, number 2, number 3 makers of cars, has the highest number of public transportation users.
Okay.
And they have 1 or 2 cars per family.
They still have 1 or 2 cars per family in
Yeah.
Japan. Okay.
Because going back to, this is now going into the technicalities of daily transportation planning. What causes congestion is the utilization of vehicles going to work. You have to understand that as a city, we move, and this is now going into mobility, we move every day. This is a wide subject, so I'm going to piece by piece look at it. First, let's look at the man and time. It's very nice illustration. You ask me what time I wake up. It's today is 5:30 because when I was in City Hall it's 5 o'clock. Now it's 5:30 in the morning. But I sleep at 9:30. So that's 8 hours. I wanted to sleep for 8 hours. Because that's basically what we need, 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
But your work is usually, as a normal government or private sector work, is 40 hours a week. Or for a 5-day week, that's 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
So basically, all of us have this time, 24 hours. 8 hours of which is for sleeping. 8 hours of which is for working. That's almost everybody, including students, because you have approximately 8 hours of school, approximately. So you have only. I'm trying to press this issue because people don't realize it, how bad the situation is. You have only 8 hours of what we call extra time, the manageable time. Because you cannot manage your work, you have to work there. You cannot manage your sleep, you're sleeping. You cannot work while you're sleeping. So you have only 8 hours that are actually to budget what you do in your 8 hours. So you do this for visiting, you do to cut your hair, you do for studying, you do for listening to music, you do for all of these things. That's 8 hours.
Yeah.
But you cut from it the time to go to work. Because, the 8 hours does not include the time to go to work. That's extra. So it takes you 1 hour to go to work in Manila, that's 2 hours off the 8 hours. So you have only 6 hours. But right now in Manila, there's a lot of people who go to work 4 hours. So what kind of life do you have? 10 hours sleep, 10 hours work, and the extra 8 hours is 4 hours going to the office and 4 hours going home. That's what government should be looking at. How do we look at our people who do not have time for their families, who do not have time for any other things, because their extra 8 hours that they use is used for transportation.
So that's like a very low quality of life.
That's a very low quality of life. The highest quality of life, if you have the extra, if you work at home, like me now, I work at home, I have the whole 8 hours with my son, with anything that I do. That's not cut off from my allowance of 8 hours. That's what we do. What is important in transportation or mobility is the time element. It's not, well, of course, convenience and all of these things, but it's really the time element.
Yeah, well, if you save time, it's more convenient.
That's why.
Essentially.
But again, we chop this up into different smaller problems. The smaller problem, some of the problems actually is people don't understand. In Cebu and in Metro Manila and many other cities, that sometimes the time that is used from going from home to work is composed of the direct traveling time plus the time of waiting for the public transportation. And that's why cars are very attractive, because it's a direct line between home and work, and you don't have to wait. It's at your own time. If you take public transportation, jeepney, bus, or MRT or BRT, you have to wait for the next bus. If it's a jeepney, you have to wait for 1 hour because there are so many people on the road. Now, it's important to understand that when you transfer, if you have 2 rides and you ask people, that's why I always ask people who are taking jeepneys or buses, how many rides did you take? Go to Lapu-Lapu. 2 rides, sir, because I have to go there and then transfer. In your transfer in Manila, I've tried to compute. Sometimes the transfer time is almost the same as the trip.
Yeah.
And that's why when we plan the bike is very good because it's direct.
Yeah.
You don't transfer. Unless you also take, sometimes you take your bike. In Manila, you can bring your bike to some big buses.
Yeah.
So,
I know that like some foreign countries, they even have a bike rack in the front of the in front of the bus. So you can put your bike there, lock your bike there, and then go inside the bus. And
I think MRT3 allows folding bikes.
Oh, no, I remember seeing I don't know where that was, what country that was. There was a big bus. In front of the big bus, there's bike racks. Good. You can fit like 4 or 5 bikes.
Yeah. They have.
Yeah. Oh. So like you're talking about like quality of time. That's for me one of the biggest reasons. That's actually the main reason why I decided to try cycling as a commute. Never mind the environment. Honestly, like never mind the environment. It was me. How can I not be stuck in traffic for 3 hours? And then I tried the bike, and then I also realized, oh wait, it's also a lot cheaper than riding a car. It's a lot cheaper. It's not even, there's no comparison whatsoever, because you're counting fuel. Of course, fuel, that's the no-brainer. But then also, what a lot of people miss out is the maintenance on the car. The more you use the car, the more you eventually will have to shell out on repairing the car. No? So it's so much cheaper. So that for me, that was the factor that made me start was that you save so much time. And then the next factor was that I realized later on, it's a lot cheaper. And then, it's good that it's good for the environment. That's a nice little plus, but not my main motivation, honestly. No? So I was thinking about this because the one of the reasons why I wanted you here is, because I remember reading in one of your Facebook posts and you were commenting, it's important to just continue this conversation, to just have the conversation, just so that more people will know more about this issue, about this transportation, traffic. And then it's nice to get your views on it because you have a much more, less frustrated views probably because, if you talk to a regular person, then they'll complain about, it's so traffic, and it's either they're in a car, and like you talk to me, I'll be like, yeah, then ride a bike, So it's interesting to get your view, your point of view, no? So there were some things that you wrote about that I'm kind of curious to hear. So, what is congestion pricing? I think you suggested congestion pricing versus road widening, or anyway, what is congestion pricing?
Okay, we start off with congestion pricing is simply trying to price the cost of transport or mobility. When you go back to our main our main discussion, that you have only 8 hours, and then you have 8 hours, which is you can do whatever you want to do. But then again, it's being sliced off with transportation. So you have 2 hours, 2 hours. This transportation, it costs something. These are interconnected, but I'd like to interject this in. The main problem of a person or a family, the major cost, except when you're very rich, but if you're poor, or you're middle class, your household income, the major component of your household income, the bigger component are 2 things, which are one and the same: housing and transportation. Basically, housing and transportation are one problem. It's not separate problem. It's the same problem altogether. Because if you're working from your house, there's no transportation cost. That's why it's the same problem. You cannot solve transportation without solving the housing problem, and vice versa. You have to look at both at the same time. So when you price that, and let's look at transportation. When you price that, the price that you have is for the public transport people are the cost of the fare. That's the cost. But for the country has to come up with infrastructure to do that, and that's the cost, no. Now, for the road is made by government. It's constructed by government, coming from taxpayers. So tax is everybody's contribution to nation building. So whatever we put there, if we price per square meter of road space, then everybody is supposed to be contributing to that. And everybody should be in a perfectly democratic society. If you have 100 people and 100 square meters, each person should have 1 square meter each. Right?
Okay.
If you're democratic. But that's not the case. Because in our case, you have 6 square meters being used by a single person using a car.
By a car, and then you have the person in the jeepney
or a bus.
The 6 or a bus. The 8 square meters is with 16 people, 20 people. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not democratic.
Yeah, when you were talking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I was trying to picture it in my head. I was like, yeah, that's what cars in traffic look like, and then there's a bus in the middle. 1:1, and then the bus, which takes up the least space, gets the most people. So yeah, so it's not democratic. Okay.
It's not democratic. Okay. Now, the thing is, people don't know, or people don't understand that car owners are actually subsidized by government.
Yeah, because they can take up because they're taking up the most space in the road. Is that what you're saying?
Because they're not paying for the road.
Oh yeah. Oh, kana. Oh.
But when you take a jeepney, you're paying.
Yeah. The argument there is that you're paying for the car, the tax on the car.
That's yours.
Yeah.
That's not for your commute. You can pay for the car if you want, but government should not pay for its use. Go back to the concept again. There's so many concepts.
Of course,
concept. You differentiate between car ownership and car use.
Okay.
Car ownership is something that is a privilege for you. Car use is something that for you. In other words, you have car ownership. You paid for it. Car use, you have to pay. You're not paying for it.
Here in the Philippines, you don't pay for car use.
You don't pay for car use. While we're using the road for the car, but those people who are using jeepneys and buses are paying.
Yeah, because I'm not familiar. So the jeepney has to pay the government to have a jeepney, diba? Is that
the
franchise,
license,
the franchise?
Yeah,
that one goes directly to the government.
That goes directly to the government.
So actually, in a way, they're the ones paying for the use of the roads, as opposed to the private car owners who are just using the roads for free, unless there's a toll booth or something.
Well, let's put it this way: if everybody is equal, so everybody's equal. Okay, everybody has to pay for, not per person. You have to pay for how many square meters you're using.
That is so interesting. So, is there a country that does something like that?
Come again?
Is there a country that has congestion pricing? Like,
Singapore.
how would you?
Singapore, London,
okay.
A lot of many other.
So So Singapore does that. Singapore taxes it by charging.
Well, I've been in Manila. There's congestion. No, this congestion charging is not actually. It's called congestion charging because it's aimed to lessen congestion, but it's really equality in subsidy. Equality in subsidy, because the most subsidized form of transportation are the cars. The others are subsidized also. Everything is subsidized because the government pays for the roads. Everything is, all modes of transport, including your bike, is subsidized.
Yeah.
Because the government is building the road.
Yeah.
So everything is subsidized. But the most subsidized form is the car.
Because they take up the most space.
They must take up the most space for one person.
Yeah.
So they're the most subsidized. They should pay more. So because of that, one, you have to pay, and second, if you take up more space, you have to pay more. And third, if you are being there at that particular time is causing congestion, you have to pay more for that time. So there are two kinds of congestion charging: area-based and time-based. So, for example, in Singapore, they have, of course, they have toll roads. Toll roads is already congestion charging.
Yeah.
You have to pay for the toll. But over and above that, in Singapore, if you go to downtown Singapore at 4:00, you pay triple, or I don't know, double, triple.
Like a toll?
Yeah.
Okay.
We call that ERP, electronic road pricing.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't go to downtown Singapore at 4:00 because the rates times 4, and automatically it clicks in your account because they are so advanced. So you have already a card that all of this charging are just automatically taken off your account. That's congestion. And you go to London, you cannot go inside London without paying the congestion charge. So if you charge the number of cars who wants to go inside will be minimized. Because if you have time, I want to talk again about the concept of what they call unnecessary trips.
See, let's do it. What is that?
A lot of people don't understand what are unnecessary trips. But there are a lot of unnecessary trips. Work trips are necessary.
Okay.
I'll give you a good example of unnecessary trip. I think this happened when I was younger. I was in college, maybe when I was living in Kyoto in the south. 7:00 in the evening, I want to eat balut. Cannot find balut there, so I drive to Fuente, buy balut just to eat balut.
So
there was the traffic.
So that's an unnecessary trip.
Was it necessary? You want to eat balut? It's not necessary.
Okay.
So what is unnecessary trip? Okay, I was working in the airport, right? I was working in the airport, and I have a service car from the airport. So I said, let's go to SM North. Okay, I want to buy something. And then the car won't start. So my wife said, just take the jeepney. No, just do it tomorrow. That was an unnecessary trip. It's only, I am only trying to do it because I have a car. In other words, there are trips that you want to do because you have a car. You would not do if you don't have a car. And these are the things that we want to cut. And that's why the car is
yeah, because once you start taxing stuff like that,
yeah, you're not
going. All of a sudden, that purchase in SM becomes a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, why will I pay if I go? So a lot of people in London, it decreased the traffic congestion because it cut off a lot of unnecessary cars, and we don't realize this unnecessary trips. There are trips really that we would not have taken if the trip is paid.
Yeah.
Or if there's a little inconvenience with the trip, both. No, it's paid or if there's an inconvenience. In that case, because I'm going to take jeepney, I don't want to take the jeepney, so I did not take the trip. You could do it, like for example, in the building in one of the, I forgot the name, one of the widest, and those people living in the U.S. can tell you this. One of the expressways in Texas, they're building it. Then they try to measure the trips. Why are you not taking the trip? It's because it's congested. But if it's not congested, I would have taken the trip. Or you could have taken another route. Or you could have just saved it for another time. Or you could have saved it for another day. These are measures of unnecessary trips. And a lot of us have a lot of unnecessary trips.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can imagine my transpo habits back when I was not married and no kids.
But these things is because Because we are not paying for it.
Yeah, it's actually convenient. It's convenient enough to do it. I'm hungry. I want to buy Cheetos in the convenience store. The, 2 blocks away. I'll take the car out and then go to the 7-Eleven, buy the Cheetos, and then come back home.
But you're adding to the traffic congestion.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Interesting. So just adding a tax to something like that would, even if people could afford it, it would just, it would make people think twice. Like all of a sudden, 2 blocks away, I'll just walk it. Exercise pa. Diba?
Because you also put the congestion pricing, the road pricing, you also put it in terms of time.
Yeah.
So usually the peak hours, anywhere, all over the world, the peak hours is always in the morning when you go to work, and in the afternoon when you go
So
back
of course
home.
It's more expensive.
But
If they do
it's
it
more
by time.
expensive. If you go to the downtown, that's why you go to downtown Singapore at 4:00, it's going to be really expensive, really expensive. So you also say, why will I go to downtown at 4? I'll go there at 2:00.
Yeah.
She's trying to spread out the trips because about 60% of the trips are home to work, and the rest are the other trips. So if these trips are mixed with this, you have congestion. But if you price this here, this is early, you're going to work, you have to pay. But these trips are movable. So, if this is
The unnecessary trips, they're movable.
they're
basically.
movable. So I'll go there at 10 o'clock. You go there at another time slot. So there are two ways: space and then time.
I'm curious with your thoughts on like motorcycles, for example. So like for you, what? So you started cycling like 2 years ago, di ba, Ana? But like why not just use a motorcycle?
I was using motorcycle before for the longest time.
You were
In college.
Ah,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, because I don't know. My thoughts are like if I wanted to not go through the traffic, I would. And then if I knew how to use a motorcycle, and if I liked using a motorcycle, which I don't, I would think that the motorcycle, at least here in Cebu, would be quite convenient. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I don't mind. Well, it's personally I don't mind motorcycles. I ride. Actually, I'm thinking of buying a motorcycle. It's just my wife doesn't want me to buy a motorcycle, but I've been a motorcycle rider since I was in elementary.
Okay.
I ride motorcycles. We were in the province. We can ride motorcycles there without a license because it's a farm. So.
Yeah.
I like doing motorcycle, but there are negatives to a motorcycle. Of course, number one, the accident rates are higher.
Yeah.
Because you're unprotected.
And then you're going at a very fast speed. Also.
That's the difference between a motorcycle and the bicycle.
Yeah.
The bicycle really, it's contrary to public perception. It's not accident prone. It's the motorcycle that is accident prone, and it's really a misnomer to call a bicycle accident as a bicycle accident, because more often than not, it's caused by a car, not by the bicycle per se. So that's why I'm always also arguing against that. Why do you put in the records it's a bicycle accident? It's not caused by the bicycle. It's caused by the car. Not because, or maybe because the bicycle rider was not very careful. But I can guess 90% of the time it's the fault of the car, not the bicycle.
Yeah, it's hard to get into an accident, like a serious accident on a bicycle.
In the first place, and there's this another concept. If you read that, in Facebook, there's plenty of that.
What?
Accidents and fatalities are directly proportional to speed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at 15 kilometers per hour, viciously you don't die. At 30, you start dying. 1 out of 1 out of 10 at 30 kilometers per hour is what? 5 out of 10? And at 40 up, it's 9 out of 10.
Are those the exact? Are those?
No,
I don't know.
something of that sort.
Somewhere there.
Somewhere there. It's really, the speed matters.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. So I found that's the big difference. Like I remember before I decided to bike as a commute. So there's a lot of, prior thinking. I'm more like, is it safe? And then I remember like researching online before even doing it. And it became very clear to me that, actually, the most dangerous form of transportation in the Philippines, it seems like it's the motorcycle. Diba? I remember looking at some data, the motorcycle accidents was really high. And then next one was cars, I think. I can't remember now.
In terms of number of accidents.
In terms of number of accidents.
In terms of fatalities, it's still the car.
It's still the car, really. Really? Over the motorcycle?
In terms of fatalities.
Why is that? I would
Because
think it
of
would be
two
a motorcycle.
things. You're enclosed and higher speeds.
Okay.
In terms of accidents, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, fatalities.
Philippines or worldwide?
Worldwide.
Worldwide.
Because
really?
in motorcycles, you cannot go really very fast in motorcycles. You get maimed, not die. You get thrown off.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you're in a car accident, you're enclosed. And it's usually car against car. So.
Well, I know I feel like we could keep talking, no? So usually I try to do it between around an hour or so. But I think before we end, what can people do right now? We've talked about cycling, biking as a commute, but or is that something we should just push, just bike as a commute? What can people do right now? Let's say, either I know you pointed out very clearly that there's different types of people who are affected by the traffic, and there's varying degrees of complaining. No, but if you are struggling with traffic, if it's taking you too long, if you're I think you had another concept like mobility time or something. Like if it's taking you too long to get from point A to point B in terms of work, what can people do right now as opposed to wait for infrastructure to happen?
Well, number one, firstly, I'd really like to encourage people to bike. Now, a lot of people will always offer immediately objections or arguments why they can't.
Safety, I think, is the
temperature.
Yeah, that one. That was my next one. For me, I think the ones.
By the way, I just want to interject about temperature. Because Kuala Lumpur is actually building their bike lanes. In Kuala Lumpur, they're building bike lanes now. Kuala Lumpur and Singapore are hotter than us.
Yeah, they're hot.
That's right. They're hotter. They're more near the equator. We're not. We're not really. We're 15% away from the equator.
Singapore, I was there last year, and then they have those public bicycle rentals that you can get on your phone.
Yeah.
And then that's what I did the whole time I was there. That's what I used the whole time, and it was super cheap, super convenient.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, it's not. I actually you're gonna sweat no matter what. No, I think, but it's not as bad as people make it seem. No, but anyway, so bike,
and then, but I have to add that because the objections really is they don't like it because let me say that it's not asking you to shift from one mode to the other. What I'm only asking every time I'm interviewed, every time I'm asked, and every time I make a plea, is you bike once a week. Just try it. Because I really believe that if you bike once a week,
as a commute, Because there's different biking, like, you exercise.
Yeah, I want to
go
talk
up
about that also if you have time.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, but if you take once a week, you'll be tempted to do it twice a week. Well, in my case, I averaged when I was working in City Hall, I averaged 3 times a week. But there are times that I'm not asking you to bike the entire week. Or if you can, you bike the entire week. But there are times that you know that it's going to rain. I always look at, before I bike, I always look at the weather. It's 80% percentage of precipitation. And I ride with my wife, rides the car, so I ride with my wife. Then you do that. And there's times that I have go to a special meeting. Of course, there's still something I wanted to do, which I have not done yet. I wanted to bike on a motor, Americana.
What?
Naka-Americana.
Naka-Americana.
Yeah. I have a friend. If you're a member of How's Your Biyahe Best?
No, is that a Facebook page? Or?
Yeah, that's a Facebook group.
Okay.
I'm going to add you.
Sige.
It's based in Manila. And I have a friend who's working also in Pasig City Hall. His father is also a good friend of mine. Good friend of mine. And he's into this and is helping the city do the bike lanes in Pasig. Pasig is in the forefront. Before it was Marikina, now it's Pasig. Putting bike lanes and all of these bike racks and all of these things. And last, when was the National Heroes Day? A few days ago, there was National Heroes Day. He went there in a barong. So, makakita na ko. Ako gusto mo na ko ng buhato. Gusto mo Amerikano one. Because I saw this, who was that famous figure. And he was I think he was in Amsterdam. He was riding a bike in a suit. No? I wanted to do that. But I still want to do that.
Yeah, the government officials in Amsterdam, they all ride bikes.
Including the Prime Minister.
Yeah, diba? So,
but what I'm saying is, why not just give it a try? Just give it a try. How much does a bicycle cost? Don't buy the 400,000 bicycle.
Yeah. No, what I tell people is, actually, you probably know somebody who owns a bike and is not using it. You probably know somebody who owns a bike and is not using it. Just borrow the bike. Hey, you won't have to spend. Try it. And then if it's not for you, give it back. If it's for you, then you can save up for, at least you try it now and you can figure out what kind of bike that you want, because there's really so many different kinds of bikes.
And then you can do it for purposes that you want to, because you do it for exercise, you do it for environment, you do it for a lot of other things. Because I'm trying to shift also to the other issue of what kind of biker are you. Can I get this?
Yeah. Get it. Go ahead.
It's about the BRT again. So ito. Okay?
Yeah. I'm just gonna delete it. And,
No, where did I stop? Concept of...
I kind of forgot something.
Anyway, biking.
The concept, the kind of biker.
Kind of bikers. Because I'm not against the reasons why other people bike, but I have to make clarification on my advocacy. My advocacy is biking is a form of mobility. You have to understand that there are other people who bike not as a commute. No? These are people who bike for recreation, bike for exercise, and even environmentalist people who bike basically because of the environment, because of climate change. Because of course, when you bike, you are actually saving carbon. Instead of using your car, which emits carbon dioxide, then you just emit carbon dioxide through your breath because you're biking. But these are different groups, and sometimes the advocacy is different because even the way we bike are different. No? I'll give you a very good specific example of why certain things are different. When some of the leaders in City Hall knew that I was biking, there are plenty of them who bike also for recreation. So they come to after a meeting. Oh, you bike? So I said, yung bike manday ka? Bike niya ata. Kuha?
Kuyog
Ano?
ta.
Kuyog ta. Nang saan na ito mag-bike siya? Tim, kuyog ta bike. Kuwasan na puyo sa lahog. Kung kunang kus banawa, saan na ito pagkuyog? So, mura siya na-stop ba? Ha? Anong di man kakuyog? Because I bike going to work. So that she saw the difference. Because she's a biker. But she bikes on Saturdays or holidays. Or
He goes up to Willis or something.
Yeah, goes up with a group of people.
Yeah.
And the other day, I saw about 7 guys wearing the same uniform. Or last weekend, same uniform. They're biking. And I'm very happy that they're biking. But me, it's different. It's biking to work. The other thing that we have to understand also in biking for mobility, and it's not to discourage other people. In fact, to encourage people, it's for all forms, all aspects or all nature of life. No? But in this context, in the Philippine context, the home to work bikers are actually the majority of those home to work bikers are actually the poor.
Yeah.
And when you look at this, a lot of people who bike among the poor bike simply because they cannot afford a jeepney fare. It's not because they like it, but it's because it's a form of transportation. It's a form of free transportation that is free for them and it's free for us.
But you know, I do notice that there's a lot of, not a lot, but there are people, kind of mga my peers, no, that are starting to bike as a commute. You know, like people who work in like IT park, or you know, like they work in a call center or something. I notice now that there are more and more people,
more and more, yes,
who are just like me and like you, who are biking as a commute, and not just because, of course, you're right. Like, the majority, you see a lot of people like in a really old, small bike. Sometimes it's too small for them, but that's what they use to get to work because that's the cheapest form. But, I don't know, like in terms of going back to continuing the conversation, but
the thing is, we're not doing this because it's cheap. We're not doing this because we're poor. We're doing this because it's a good form of transportation. It's an efficient form of transportation. It's an enjoyable form of transportation.
It's convenient in a different way, actually.
Yes, and that's why I'm saying that between the bike to workers and the recreationalists, you have to take note that when you're biking for the environment, or you're biking for it's good for biking for exercise. It's good for you. You're helping yourself. When you're biking for as a commute, you're actually helping the country. You're doing it for nation building. Because you are trying to, when we look at the socio-economic realm in terms of economic benefits, you're actually contributing to the national economy when you bike to work. Because one bike to worker more is one less person owning a car who the government has to spend 6 square meters of road.
Okay. One has to spend the infrastructure on that person.
Yes, and the other person, even the other commuters. Well, you're still using the road.
The road, but much less.
Much less.
And in fact, much less road, and then much less time pag yun.
Yes, and you don't need to widen the roads.
Yeah, you don't need to widen roads for cyclists.
You look at it that way. It's really nation building. You look at it in economic benefits. I was trained in NEDA to look at projects. You have infrastructure projects, BRT, you have irrigation project. Ultimately, when you are in NEDA, you go up. You have a certain committee there called NEDA ICC. They approve projects. It's good for the country or not. What's better for the country or not. That's how they evaluate projects. And you always measure it in terms of cost, economic cost and economic benefits. Of course, the economic benefits must be higher than the economic cost. But the economic benefit is one that they will measure up to when you're approving projects. So when you bike, you're adding up to the economic benefits as compared to when you're riding a car. So, in a way, biking is very heroic. Yeah, it's actually you're contributing to the
I've never
country.
thought of it in those terms.
Well, you feel happy. You know what I learned in more than 2 years of biking? One, I can bike and I can sing. Because normally I don't sing because I'm out of tune. I don't sing really. I don't sing. I want to sing, but I don't sing in public because I'm out of tune. But I can sing in the road.
Yeah, me, I found that at least for me, the cycling, I started it purely as a commute. And then I found that I enjoyed it so much that I ended up biking. So I'm one of those people who will go up to Transcentral, I'll go up to Guba in Talamban, I'll go to Buhisan in Labangon, Dapit, or basta behind Labangon, those mountains there, go down to Danao, because I found that I really, really enjoy it. It's one of the most fun things that I get to do almost every day, basically, and then that it made me want to explore more of Cebu. So I've been to so many parts of Cebu now that I would have never gone to if I never started biking. No, yeah.
Going back to what I can recommend or suggest to people is read a lot of blogs on mobility. Don't look at. Or the first thing that I really want to ask people is to stop looking at traffic as a problem.
Okay.
Because traffic is not a problem. Traffic is a symptom of a deeper problem. And the deeper problem is congestion when you try to analyze. We always go up early in the morning and see all of those problems that we have. And that's why they're calling a traffic summit. I don't agree with calling for a traffic summit. Why are you trying to solve a symptom? It's a symptom, but our problem is mobility. How to move our people from their places of residence to their places of work. That's what government has to work on. How do we move people in the morning to the workplace, and how do we move them back in the evening? That's the problem.
What's the most efficient way to do that?
We have a traffic congestion because we have a wrong way of moving those people. If we correct that, then we will not have traffic congestion. In fact, I dare say, and nobody can I dare say anybody to argue against me when I say I can solve the traffic congestion tomorrow.
How would you solve it tomorrow?
If I have the authority, have the power, I will ban cars tomorrow and everybody goes by bus or jeepney. You will not have any congestion.
That's true.
So if you can do that, why not do that? In other words, it can be done. It can be done. I heard, if you're familiar with Enrique Peñalosa?
No.
You listen to him. I'll send you links to him. Enrique Peñalosa was the one who built Transmilenio, the BRT of Bogota in Colombia.
Okay.
That's the most popular and the most, celebrated BRT in the whole world. Biggest BRT also. The first one was in Curitiba in 1974, but this one is 1998 to 2001. And he came here twice. He was the one who told us all of this about this BRT. And he's the one who said, imagine this, just to make a point. If suddenly there is a biological bomb in Mactan, and in 2 hours time, or say 3 hours time, everybody will die in Mactan Island. How will you evacuate Mactan?
Oh, that's a problem. I
How
guess.
will you evaluate Mactan?
Oh.
As many as possible, if not as many as possible.
Then you would bust them out.
You bust them out. You take away all the cars and bust them out.
Yeah, that's right. Oh.
So why are you going to bust them out? Why not cars?
Because the cars they'll get stuck.
Yeah.
As anyone who's seen a movie where the world is about to about to end, there's traffic everywhere
So
because
you will understand
cars are stuck all over.
that the most efficient way of moving those people from Mactan to here to evade being to dying after 2 or 3 hours is to bust them. So that's the most efficient way. So why not do it every day? See,
that's right.
I'm just saying that situation tells you that if you have really that problem of some people dying, you'll go to the most efficient way. And the most efficient way of doing that is to bust them out. So if you have this problem now moving your people to the points of work, then you bust them to their points of work. Leave the car at home.
Yeah, well, of course, we both know that's not going to happen. But what you're saying is that we should take into account like the other aspect, because that's obviously the most efficient way to move people. Like, well, if you had a train, then you could put the train. That would probably be better. But then that one would be the most efficient.
Train. Try to work it out.
The bus would still be more efficient.
The bus will be more efficient.
Oh, but like there has to be this balance between. Right now we are overbalanced towards cars, diba? And then not enough towards mass transport systems.
That's what at the beginning of the discussion I'm saying. We have this word, we call it aspirational. It's an aspiration. We have to think of it this way. We have to look forward this way. Otherwise, we're stuck. We're stuck in traffic the same way as we're stuck in traffic now. It should be of course you say, of course we both know that it cannot be done now. Of course. But we should aim towards that. We should continue the conversation towards that.
Yeah.
We should not digress. Because what's happening now, actually, and it came out in the newspapers, I think yesterday, that in 2016, there were about 350,000 vehicles in Cebu. Today, 2019, it's 500,000. So imagine the jump.
Yeah.
So somebody text me or send me a PM that, this is what happened. No, that data is lacking. I said, disaggregate the data. This is cars, this is bus, this is jeepney, this is vans, and this is trucks. That's how LTO disaggregates the data. And you can find out that these 4 did not grow as much as the cars who grow. So showing that data does not really show what caused it. It is this 10,000 down payment.
Yeah, it's really easy to purchase a car. It really is.
You get to a car. 1,000 down payment to get to a car.
Like a 15,000 peso down payment, you can bring a car home na. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that's a good place to end. Maybe, I don't know if it's a high note or a low note.
Come again?
I don't know if we ended in a high note or a low note.
No, it's
no, but I really think this was important because I want to be able to open. Hey, for me also, like I want a different way of looking at this problem, because like as you mentioned, I solved it for myself, but I know that cycling around Cebu is probably not for everybody, no, or maybe it is, but I suspect it would be very difficult for certain people to do it, no. But the thing is, there are ways around it, and there are different ways of approaching this problem, no, as you said. Do you want to add anything before we end? Anything that you want to...
Yeah, there's another way. There's another way.
Oh, what way?
Walking.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
We have that really. People has a weird way of looking at me sometimes in City Hall. When I arrived there, said, where you're not here. Where were you? I was in Capitol. And said, so how long did it take you to come here? Because there's traffic during the day. I said, 30 minutes. Hey, there's traffic. How will you arrive in 30 minutes? I walk. If I have a meeting in Capitol, I walk.
Does it take 30 minutes from City Hall to Capitol to
again?
walk? From City Hall to Capitol, it takes 30 minutes to walk?
Because I don't walk straight. I walk slowly.
30 minutes. That's faster than I thought.
No, what you mean faster? It takes 1 hour. No,
I really don't know. I don't walk.
About 30 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, okay na.
It's
Walk.
faster by bike. It's about 15, 20 minutes by bike.
Yeah, it sounds so obvious when you say it, but yeah, just walk or just bike. But then, like I mentioned, it took me 10 years of driving around here as somebody who goes to work to realize, there are other alternatives. No? Where can people find you online, Paul? Do you have like a public page? Because I'm going to link to it also in the show notes. Street Life, the Facebook page. Okay. All right. Thank you, kayo, ha?
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Paul Villarete. My biggest takeaway from this conversation is that it just gave me a different perspective looking at the congestion problem in the city. There's so many ways of going about transportation in general. So I think the problem is that it's not cars per se, but it's that we aren't balanced right now. So there is an imbalance right now in how people move themselves from point A to point B in the city, and it's mostly cars. And I think if we tilt towards being car-centric, then we can expect the congestion problem to be increased, to just have more traffic. So I think if we lean towards a different, if we take away from the cars, we take away, I'm not saying cars are bad, but like there's an imbalance right now towards cars, towards being car-centric. And if there was a way to somehow encourage people to use other forms of transportation, whether it be biking, walking, or public transportation, I'm really happy to see those new beeps, for example, popping out in the city. Then we can expect the congestion problem to lessen or improve. I'm just hoping, well, as I mentioned in the podcast, just hoping to continue this conversation. And, more bike infrastructure so I can bike better in the city. So it's a lot more bearable. And thank you, Cube Gallery, Handurao Pizza, and Kent Combs for sponsoring the podcast. The music from this podcast is Piano March by Audionautics. If you're still listening to this podcast, thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the show, head over to patreon.com/032. That's 032 in letters. You can find exclusive content there. You can find a way to directly support the show. And depending on what you do, you might even get some free exclusive merchandise only available to 032 Patreon members. And if you don't want to shell out the cash, if you're low on cash, not something that you want to do right now, I totally understand. But please help us, please help this podcast. If you enjoyed it, that came out weird. So if you enjoyed the podcast, you can still help. You can just share this episode on social media. The more listeners we get, the more likely we are able to continue doing this podcast. Okay. See you next Tuesday for another 032 Conversations episode. Ciao.